محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. The topic of the lecture today, inshallah, is introduction to the science of fiqh and understanding what it is, understanding what the differences of opinion are, why they came about, and how they came about. So the first thing that I like to do, and I know it's going to be extra enjoyable because it's so early in the morning, is asking you all the question: what is fiqh? When I ask you, when I turn to you, and I ask, what is fiqh? When I say the word fiqh, what comes to mind, or what are some of the things that come to mind?
Understanding of
okay.
the legal.
Understanding, that's good, and that's the linguistic meaning. That's the linguistic meaning of fiqh is to understand. مَن يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. That whoever Allah intends good for, He gives them understanding of the religion. And this over here, the Prophet ﷺ, he's using it in a linguistic sense, no doubt. So, if we say that fiqh means understanding, here, what are we trying to understand? When I go to understand the Quran, or if I go to understand Sirah, or if I go to understand Aqidah, would I call all of these different sciences fiqh? Or is there a particular science that we associate fiqh with? There's no science we associate fiqh with? Well, you guys are in a bigger problem than I thought. I'm going to have to talk to your imam. Yeah, when we talk about fiqh, what are we trying to understand? Very good. We're trying to understand the Sharia. When we try to understand the Quran, we call that tafsir, right? When we try to understand a hadith, we call that the science of hadith. When we try to understand Allah Azza wa Jalla, or we try to understand Iman, we call that the science of Aqidah. Fiqh is trying to understand the Sharia. What is the Sharia?
Laws and rules.
MashaAllah. Now we're starting to get closer. The brother said laws and rules. Laws and rules is concerning what?
Our faith and deen.
Okay, in our faith and our deen. Now, that's good. That's good. But laws and faith concerning Allah Azza wa Jal, laws and faith concerning the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, laws and faith concerning the angels, or what? That's why I like doing this at Fajr. Yeah, fine.
Acts of worship.
Acts of worship, mashallah. Excellent. Excellent. Acts of worship. Understanding what is allowed and what is not allowed concerning specifically acts of worship. Alright? Is it just acts of worship, or does it go beyond that? Or another problem that we have now is what is an act of worship? Yes?
The ibadat and mu'amalat.
Okay, ibadat and mu'amalat, we've gotten closer. We've gotten to two-thirds of the answer. So ibadat is defining our relationship with who? With Allah Azza wa Jal. Very good. In mu'amalat is defining our relationship with who?
People.
With people, right? Between each other, as a community, as a society. So I said that's two-thirds of the answer, right? So that means that there's another third to the answer, which we'll get to, inshallah. Which we'll get to. And it's not a big deal, alhamdulillah. So basically fiqh is understanding what Allah Azza wa Jal allowed and what He didn't allow. Right? Understanding Allah Azza wa Jal's halal and understanding His haram. So what is fiqh based on? Just turn it this way. So like we said, linguistically it means to understand. Right? This is something that we established. And Islamically, it is the knowledge concerning Islamic legal ruling extracted from certified sources. Now the question comes, what are our certified sources? What are our primary references? Where do we go back to? If I wanted to find the ruling in Islam, and now we're talking about, because you have two groups of people that we're dealing with. You're dealing with scholars and you're dealing with the lay Muslim. In terms of a scholar, now let's assume that we have a scholar. Where is he going to go back to? What is he going to do to get to a ruling? What was that echo? Yeah.
Quran and Hadith.
Okay, the Quran and the Sunnah, good. Are these our only sources? No, we have more than the Quran and the Sunnah. But the Ijma', very good, mashallah. What is Ijma'?
Consensus.
It's consensus, right? It's a scholarly consensus on a particular issue. How to arrive to that consensus is probably a class for Usul al-Fiqh that we'll have to get into. But consensus, right? If there's a scholarly consensus on an issue, that's another way to derive rulings. Anything else? Or these are the three certified sources.
Analogies, qiyas.
Qiyas. So there you go. These are the four. Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' and Qiyas. And this is something that the entire Ummah has agreed upon. This is something that all of the madahib have agreed upon except the Lahiriya. They have a difference of opinion concerning Qiyas in what they say, but they do actually use it. So if you look at all of the madahib in general, these are the four certified sources, or the four ways that a ruling is derived or a ruling is arrived at. Now, where do some of the differences come in? Because there are additional sources that the madahib use. There are additional sources that the madahib use. So for example, in the Ahnaf you'll find istihsan, which is basically the ruling that the imam leaned toward, and this became a certified source. And the Shafi'iyya, you will find that they will take the qawl of the tabi'i, who is a student of a companion, and they will use that as a certified source. Malik, rahimahullah, he used to use the examples of the sons and the grandchildren of the people of Medina, because these were the sons and the grandchildren of the companions. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he used to use al-Masalih al-Mursala, which is basically weighing the potential pros and cons in different issues. So these were additional sources that the different madahib use, and this kind of helps us understand, okay, why did they come to different rulings? Because they had different sources, in addition to these four agreed upon ones. So why did it emerge as a science? And this is something that we have in all of our sciences of the religion, because it's not like you're going to go back during the time of the companions and say, okay, you know, who was the specialist in nahu, you know, in Arabic grammar, or who was the specialist in tafsir, or who was the specialist in fiqh. These sciences, they emerged over time, you know, in terms of defining them, in terms of qualifying them, in terms of coming up with the different resources that these sciences have. But basically the idea behind it was to develop a legal system, you know, to come out, okay, how do we figure out what Allah Azza wa Jal has allowed for us? How do we figure out what Allah Azza wa Jal has prohibited for us? And there's a famous hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إن الحلال البين والحرام البين وبينهما أمور متشابهات لا يعلم كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات استحزها لدينه وعرضه ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام. The permitted is clear and the forbidden is clear. What falls between them are doubtful issues, that which most do not know. Whosoever aids these doubtful issues has saved his religion and honor, and whosoever willingly falls into them will fall into the forbidden. So over here, the Prophet ﷺ, he's saying that most people don't know these things. Most people will not or do not know these things. So what does that mean? That there are some who do, right? So if most people don't know them, that means that there is a small group of people that do. Who is that group of people? Huh? I heard the answer. The scholars, the ulama, right? It is the ulama. You will find the academians, the specialists in particular fields. These are the ones who will know the answer, right? If a majority of the people don't know something, that means that there is a minority that does. And this is something that you'll find generationally. And this is a promise of the Prophet ﷺ, that you'll find most of the people, even nowadays, how many books do we have on halal and haram? How many issues do we fight amongst ourselves? That brother, you should pray like this, brother, you should stand like that, brother, you should eat like this, brother, you should make sure the neck is still on when you go buy the meat, brother, you should not eat at that restaurant. Why? Why does this happen? Because of ignorance. We don't know. And who is this? If you think about it, who are the people who are having these conversations? Majority of the people, right? Majority of the people are having these conversations. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ promised that this is going to happen. He said the majority of the people won't know halal and haram. They're going to sit there and they're going to bicker and they're going to fight amongst themselves. And the people who do know them, you don't see them having these conversations. The ulama, they don't have these conversations because they know. What do they need to bicker and fight over? And if he knows something is right or knows something is wrong, he's going to go and do that thing. He doesn't sit there and need to argue with anybody. So, like I said, this is one of the reasons that the science came about. Even Imam Ahmad, he said that this hadith is one of four that is the pillars of the religion. So why are there madahib? This is the next logical question. Fiqh is something, it's a human endeavor, right? It's a way that the scholars, the Muslims came up with to help us understand, okay, how do I define if something is allowed and how do I define if something is forbidden. And this science came about due to that because there was a need for it. Yes, Allah Azza wa Jal sent us the guidance through the Quran. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ guided us through the Sunnah. But as we'll get to, okay, where did the flaw happen, or why did these differences come about? So we have this divine revelation, right? We have the Quran and we have the Sunnah. And then we have the Islamic ruling, right? This is the progression. We have revelation and we have the ruling. This looks pretty straightforward, yes or no? Like, if Allah says something is wrong, we don't do it. If the Prophet ﷺ said is something we have to do, we do it. It seems very simple, right? It seems very simple, and it's a very simplistic approach on actually approaching and dealing with fiqh. Now, where does the problem come in? Us, right? That's really the problem. The problem is that you have human intellect. Now, human intellect, is it divine in any way? Absolutely not. Like, there's a huge shortcoming. There's a huge shortcoming in the human intellect. And when you have human reasoning and you have human intellect dealing with the divine, right? Because that's what we're dealing with. When we're dealing with Allah's statements, when we're dealing with His sayings, when we're dealing with the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, which were divinely inspired, what happens? You have a shortcoming here, because there's no shortcoming in the text. Is there any shortcoming in the Quran? Na'udhu billah, abadan. Is there any shortcoming in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? Na'udhu billah, abadan. There's absolutely not. So where did the shortcoming come in? The shortcoming came in when regular people got involved. Because where were the first issues of khilaf? Where were the first issues of differences? Did it happen during the time of the Prophet ﷺ or no? Yes, it did. I mean, during the time of revelation, ya ikhwan, while the revelation was coming down, you had companions who differed. And there are many, many cases, many, many stories of how and when they differed and on what issues they differed in. Even amongst themselves. And these differences, they only increased as time passed. And some very simple examples. How to do tayammum. How to do tayammum. There are two companions who were making tayammum. One of them, he struck the ground, he wiped his hands, and he wiped his face. The other companion, he rolled around in the dirt. Both of them made ijtihad, and this is the conclusion that they came to. A difference or no? Or is it that they did the same thing? There's a big difference. Not only that, is it in a issue of the religion? Yes, on how to do tayammum, how to purify yourselves, how to prepare ourselves for salah. Yani this is a small issue, this is a major issue. Because the way that you perform that tayammum is going to determine whether your salah is acceptable or not. So it's a major issue. Other issues, there are many issues during the time, the people who went to Bani Qurayza. The Prophet ﷺ, he told them, he said, do not pray Asr until you reach Bani Qurayza. Everybody left. Some of them, they stopped and prayed. The others, they waited until they reached Bani Qurayza and they prayed. Both groups of people, both received the same order from the Prophet ﷺ, and you have two completely opposite dealings with it. They asked the people who prayed, okay, why'd you pray? They said the Prophet ﷺ didn't want us to miss Asr. The intention behind what he said is he wanted us to hurry up and move faster. And the people who said that he told us to pray, they said this is an order, this is a hukam from the Prophet ﷺ, and we're going to take it as this, even if we have to pray later. During the time, the Prophet ﷺ, he was told this, and what did he do? He smiled. And you know what's interesting about this hadith? He didn't tell anybody who was right and who was wrong. Determining al-qibla, another situation, where all the companions, they prayed in different directions based on their ijtihadat. This again in front of the Prophet ﷺ, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So one of the big lessons here that we take away from all of these ahadith is that ikhtilaf itself is jaiz. Having differences of opinion is permissible. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed it to happen in front of him. Same nusus, ya ikhwan, the same exact texts, the same exact sources, with a completely difference in how to view it and how to deal with it. So, many of these madhab are ascribed to the Aimma, right? They're ascribed to the four major Imams. What is an Imam? When we say Imam, what is it?
Leader of the community.
A leader of a community? That's in a modern pretext.
The four imams.
Right, when we think about the Imams, we generally think about the four Imams. It doesn't mean that they're the only ones, obviously, but we generally think about the four Imams. And why did they get like this Imam status? What's so great about an Imam status?
Because their ruling survived.
Okay, the ruling survived, so if your rulings don't survive, you're not an Imam? You're not? Because then we would say the condition for being an Imam is being famous, right?
They did considerable research. So it's like
Okay.
14 days of PhDs.
Okay, so we would try to make them equivalent to like PhDs. Mashi, okay, I can see that. What else? Anybody else?
He has the full knowledge of Islam.
Okay. طيب, huh? Yes. The one who leads the prayer. Yes, that's also a Shari'i meaning for an Imam. But in general, I don't think Imam Abu Hanifa got famous because he led the people in prayer. I think he got famous for his ruling.